Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of This is My Bourbon Podcast. I am your host, Perry. I'm on my own this week. Got a great interview for you coming up here in just a bit, recording this on vacation. And it's after 10 o'clock, so I'm trying to be a little bit quieter than I normally would. Sipping on some Jim Beam Bonded at the moment. Still is one of my favorite bonded bourbons out there. It's funny, I brought... maybe I'll save it for what we've been drinking recently. Hey, if you're new to the show and you've not yet subscribed, please do so. Help us out immensely. And if you're returning, hope you're doing well. Thanks for being here. If you have not yet, please also leave us a 5-star rating and review. Really helps out the show, gets us in front of new listeners, and maybe people who have listened to the show before and you're just trying to bring them back for another round. You can also find our YouTube content, youtube.com/thisismybourbonpodcast. Had a new video come out last Thursday on why Rare Breed is the best value in bourbon. It's going to be the first in a series of videos. I'm really excited for those to come out here in the future. And then if you are not yet a supporter of us on Patreon, that's patreon.com/mybourbonpodcast for as little as $1 a month. Really helps the show out. All right. Get through what we've been drinking recently, and then we're going to hop into the main episode because it is a really fun conversation that I got to have with Jason Brauner of Buzzard's Roost. But as I was kind of talking about earlier, it's funny because I didn't realize it until we got down here, but I packed 3 bonded bourbons and 3 barrel-proof bourbons/whiskeys because I had a Jack Daniel's single barrel proof in there as well. And so you're either kind of towing the line of getting in trouble or you're just diving full force into the shallow end with a blindfold on. So there's no in between on this vacation, apparently. But that being said, I have been enjoying the Jim Beam Bonded, T.W. Samuels Bottled and Bond, and the Benchmark Bonded, courtesy of Brian and Tammy Brennicky. Such a great bottle, man. Such a good mixer, too. All 3 of those bondeds are great mixers. But on the barrel proof side, of course, an Elijah Craig barrel proof, a Rare Breed. I actually have a Rare Breed rye with me as well, if I was feeling a little squirrely. And then, as I said before, the Jack Daniel's single barrel proof. So, living my best life, man. Oh, also had Landshark recently, too. Oh, Landshark. It's nothing really that important, but it's enough to make a memory that I forgot I had, or bring back memories that I forgot I had. All right, that's enough rambling from me. I hope you guys enjoy this interview. I'll be back with you at the end of the show to provide tips and bits, wrap things up. Enjoy. I am incredibly excited to be welcoming our next guest. He is the founder of Buzzard's Roost Whiskey. He is also a native Kentuckian as well. Correct? Yeah, I wanted to make sure I didn't get that wrong.
That is true.
You've done so much in Kentucky that I didn't want to, just assume that you were also a native here as well. But it's Jason
Brauner.
Sorry. Yeah. Oh, right out of the gate, I screwed something up.
Believe me, I've been called worse.
If I had just looked at your Zoom window and seen that your name was a little bit longer, extra syllable in there, I would have been fine.
There's another one. I guess I did some show with another guy the other day, bitching about something, and some of the comments were Braun on it. So maybe it was the name's too long, it gets cut off, abbreviated for something. I don't know. I'm fine with it. We're in the ballpark anyway.
Fair enough. Yeah. So I'm first of all very excited to have you here on the show. We've been kind of floating around doing this with you for a little while, and it finally got set up and set in stone. And I wanted to kind of give you the opportunity, first and foremost, to talk about who you are, why Buzzard's Roost exists, how it kind of came to be. I want you to talk about the whiskey itself as well, because you guys you're pretty heavy in the rye right now. Of course, right. But there is a bourbon that's on the way, so I'm going to turn it over to you for some of that.
Yeah, well, Perry, thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
Anything we can do to get out there and preach about it. Well, I'm pretty simple. I'm born and raised here in Kentucky. I lived my whole life here in Louisville. Got in a bar and restaurant business pretty early on.
Mm-hmm.
I've been in the restaurant business started cooking 14, 15, whatever, latchkey kid, kind of go home, lock yourself in, make something to eat. So I figured if I'm going to eat, I'm going to eat well. So anyhow, started my own restaurant when I was 21, started a little pizza place. Did that for about 10, 11 years. Decided to do another, not so much fine dining, but an upper scale restaurant. Mm-hmm. Sitting around drinking some whiskey with a buddy of mine. And, he was going to go in business with me. We were going to see what we were going to call the next restaurant. And he said, let's call it Bourbon's. And by God, it just felt right. And that's what we did. Called it Bourbon's. Started doing a bunch of research. I mean, I'd already done some drinking research, and I had some relatives that worked at my brain's all scrambled. But,
that's all right.
I actually grew up just down the street from National Distillery.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So,
wow.
My great aunt and uncle, a couple of my actually great aunts and uncles worked at National and retired from there. So I've got some pretty cool little trinkets from National Distillery that they had passed on to me.
That's so cool.
But, we were never directly in the business. It just seemed like I always grew up around bourbon. So I knew a little bit about it anyway. So it was just very intriguing to me, just for my family's sake and just because we had been around it so much to do a deep dive into it. And I was going to do a bourbon steakhouse, and I was like, I didn't want to be boxed into that corner. So, and then seeing, how much the French have kind of influenced Kentucky and influenced kind of bourbon with Bourbon Street. And, so I wanted to make it as kind of a Southern restaurant. So we decided to call it, or the French influence, which is a bistro. So, I think we're here in Kentucky, we're the north of the South, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it really tried to encompass all of that from Kentucky down to New Orleans, and not as much, New Orleans has a lot of island flavor in their food, just from their different, culture,
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
I love New Orleans food, but we're kind of a little north of that. So, it's just like I said, we're kind of the north of the South and kind of a little bit of a Southern flair to our food. Yeah. And then, I wanted a great bar as backdrop. And after doing all this research about bourbon, I mean, what a great backdrop to have,
Yeah, no kidding.
At the time when we opened, I started thinking about this in the year probably 2000, 1999, maybe. But, when you look at it, and 95% of the world's bourbon comes from 70 to 100 miles from where I'm standing now. That's just amazing to me.
Yeah.
And at that time, none of the distilleries really had tours. I think we went on a tour. We went on a hard hat tour at Buffalo Trace. We went to Makers, and I think I asked them, how many employees do you have? Makers said like 50 at the time. So
golly,
that amazed me. Took a trip to Napa with my wife and kind of got pissed off. They were really snooty to me about bourbon and really surprised that we had any teeth or she wasn't barefoot and pregnant. And, I was just out to educate the world about bourbon once I started learning about it.
Of course.
And, and that's kind of where Bourbon's Bistro started. So then obviously we did bourbon dinners, we did bourbon flights, just really got into whiskey, met all the players and did a bunch of single barrels. So I've probably been over 100 single barrel picks. So kind of developed a palate over the years and always wanted my own brand, forever.
Oh, of course. We all do.
And, I felt like I was getting a following with some of my picks and there were different picks and, from different distilleries, which were great. But then it just kind of happened. We had a couple of people that were interested and we started talking. So it's a separate group from Bourbon's Bistro there, but there's 4 of us that started Buzzard's Roost. We were going to, first we were shopping for a distillery. And I tell this to everybody. It didn't take me long to figure out that they're not going to nobody's going to give me $30 million. So,
No.
but so, and a lot of the investors said, you don't have any track record. We're not, you need to really start a brand, which we didn't want to do because I'm pretty picky about my whiskey. So
Sure.
We did decide to start a brand, and I'm working very closely with Independent Stave, which is a big part of what we do, and decided to hit the market with some young rye. We source from MGP. We're totally transparent about that, and always will be.
Good for you.
Our stuff, our magic comes really in our secondary aging, our barreling. And we call ourselves, kind of scratching the surface of trying to be more maturation people than because we're starting with good whiskey. It's not like we're taking bad whiskey and making it good. I think we're taking good whiskey and making it great, I think.
Yeah.
And, I'm not a rye fan, so I guess we can talk more about that here in a bit. But I think that's kind of it in a nutshell. I've always been kind of culinary. I've always had these just flavor, palates, tasting different foods, and got into whiskey and really just enjoyed what I was doing and just decided to take it to the next level, basically.
I definitely want to touch on the north of the South notion too, because I'm in Lexington. So I'm also, Kentucky born and raised. And it does kind of have that flair of like there's some of that like meeting of, I don't want to say upper class or like higher end stuff that you might find in the North in like Chicago and Boston and New York or, places like that. But then you've also got these very homey touches to everything. It just feels very comfortable and familiar that comes from the South. And I think that, the Kentucky is not only the perfect place for bourbon and rye to just be made, it's also the perfect place for bourbon and rye to have a hospitality industry, right? And
yeah, I agree.
Because we are able to show people the kindness that we all were raised on in the South. It's really been a great way for us to showcase how amazing bourbon is. Right. And how important it is to us, not just as Americans, but specifically as Kentuckians as well. So in that kind of notion, what was your goal as you were starting to tell people about Buzzard's Roost? Where you were trying, what was your sales pitch almost? Because, there's 1,001 new brands that pop up all the time. But when you were trying to showcase it, where were you coming from?
Well, again, starting with the restaurant industry and, I was out to educate the world about bourbon. So now, I'm just out to educate the world about my whiskey and why it's different. Yeah. So, me somewhat talking or teaching people about it comes naturally to me because at first it was kind of uphill battle a little bit, but now of course everybody's doing it. But it's just, if I can sit down with somebody and taste this whiskey with them and go through it with them and let them kind of feel their way through it and then talk about it, because I really don't like to, you can lead people off of a cliff if you want to.
Sure.
I can tell you it tastes like bubble gum, and you might find a little hint of bubble gum in there somewhere. Hopefully not. So I don't like to really talk till after we get to sipping it, and but then we start to talk about what we're tasting, what we're drinking.
Right.
And to me, our process, that we were going to talk about, makes all the difference in the world. So we buy the same whiskey, and the different expressions are through the barrels that we use.
Right.
The barrels that we secondary age in, which I said are made by Independent Stave Company. Mm-hmm. I've worked with their wood research department very closely. We worked, I've learned more about wood over the last 3 years than probably anybody needs to know. But we've developed 4 Buzzard's Roost. We have, I think it's right around 10 proprietary barrels that we use. and nobody else can use them. So they're our recipe. They're what we developed. They were developed through my taste profile, what I wanted to see out of these barrels. And it's really it turns these ryes into what I call a bourbon drinker's rye. So we've developed these barrels that really pull out certain notes that I love in bourbon and that I want to see in whiskey in general.
Right.
Like I said, we've got sipping whiskeys in the name, Buzzard, Roost sipping whiskeys. I never really enjoyed sitting around sipping on a rye. And I figured if we can do this with a rye to where I enjoy sipping on it, what can we do with this whiskey world that we're hopefully getting ready to get into big time?
Yeah, absolutely. So I know that the kind of easy answer for this question is because it doesn't take as long to age. It's quicker to get to the market. But yeah, why rye? Was it because just, were you kind of convincing yourself, do you think, subliminally into wanting to like rye so that, if you like, oh, I like this, so other people are going to like it too, right? So,
that's kind of carried over from my barrel picks to where I find a lot of people like my barrel picks. And then, some people will talk about, because I hear a lot, different stores are like, man, I thought their barrel pick was terrible. And I'm like, yeah, you got to know what you're picking. So if I could make something that I enjoyed from rye, and we're still this is all experimental, Sure. The barrel should taste like this after it's done, We've run into a lot of obstacles, but in general, I think we're making some headway in this it's not really reverse engineering, but we're starting with a barrel and kind of working backwards, even though, we're looking more deep into the barrel other than just a toast and a number 4 or 3 char. We use a real heavy toast and we use a number 1 char exclusively.
Wow.
So that's huge in what we do and how we do it. And like I said, I still think with this kind of research that we're scratching the surface on nobody's ever really paid that much attention to the wood, nor did they maybe have the capabilities. We can chemically extract, through all these different spider graphs and bar charts and pie graphs, we know what compounds are coming out of the wood at certain temperatures at certain times. And Independent Stave has done that research for me. So they know, I can basically, make my own barrel, somewhat what it's going to taste like.
Absolutely.
It's pretty cool, when you look at all the data and all the research. But this was has been going on for years for those guys. They're one of the, premier barrel makers in the world. And they have put in a lot into this research and development department. And even though I'm a traditional guy, as far as how I like whiskey and how I like it made, I think that this is an innovative way. It's just like we're not cheating. We're not putting it in some kind of, rum barrel or port barrel or whatever, some kind of flavored barrel. Yeah. This is a brand new 53-gallon brand new oak barrel, and we just char it different. We just treat it different. It's like a mad scientist. We kind of just treat that barrel different to mold it to bring out different flavors from the wood.
Right. Yeah. So just for clarification, when you all receive the whiskey, it has already been aged some.
That's correct.
Right?
We've been working with 3-year-old MGP. Mm-hmm. Now we do have certain places and certain batches that we get from those guys that we like, out of certain barrels, certain places in the warehouse. Right. We don't really divulge that, but they sell whiskey to everybody. But what we'll do is we'll send that to Kentucky Artisan Distillery. That's where we're doing all of our headquarters kind of is. Gotcha. Contract work out there. They will rebarrel those barrels into what barrels we tell them. So we get all of our barrels, our empty barrels from Lebanon, Missouri. Independent Stave is in Lebanon, Missouri, Lebanon, Kentucky. I think they're building a new plant somewhere else as well. But so ours come from Missouri, and I'll tell Jade out there, I'll say, I need these barrels to go in a number 5 barrel, these to go in a number 4, 3, so on. After they age for about 6 to 10 weeks, we'll taste them about every 2 weeks, depending on the weather. Once we start tasting them, it's like, man, okay, we can pull this one for a single barrel. We can, I love this batch. We'll blend it with this batch, and we'll come up with a small batch. And that's when it, really gets fun, is when you can take these flavors and this batch needs a little more spice, or it needs a little more vanilla, or it needs a little more smoke. Yeah. Or it needs a little more finish,
Sure. What's the tasting process like before it gets rebarreled? Do you do any of that, or are you just like, is it consistent enough to where you pretty much know what you're going to get after that specific whiskey goes into the barrel?
No, we taste everything. I mean, we taste everything.
That's great.
And then it's like that's not, we'll reject, we'll reject the bad barrels. It's just what we do. Cause I'm, like I said, pretty picky on the way I do things.
You should be. Yeah, exactly.
I feel if it's going to have my name on it, and I've been in it this long, that, we're going to do it once, and hopefully we're going to do it right. So,
right. I was going to ask you, and I was kind of teetering on whether or not I was going to ask you the question of what do you do with the bad barrels. So I'm happy you kind of took the lead on that one and went ahead and clarified it for us. But
yeah, we get samples of them all, and we'll reject them.
That's fair.
Which they'll just sell to somebody else, or they'll make a blend or whatever.
Sure.
It's. I mean, we have a certain criteria that we take from MGP, which, if we're paying the money, we need to get what we want from there as well. So
absolutely. How much variation is there from whiskey to whiskey in terms of mash bill? Is it all the same mash bill, or are you getting some different ones?
Well, we're starting to branch out a little bit now, but what we did to kind of give ourselves a gauge of if our barrels are working or not, we use 95.5. So it's really a high rye, 95% rye, 5% barley, and then we'll put it in our barrels. And like I said, what you see, the different lines that come out, we try to make something there for everybody with the small batch, the single barrel strength, and toasted. I've had people like them all for different reasons. It's
sure.
Kind of weird.
It's really interesting to me to hear, as you're kind of starting out and you don't really know exactly what mash bill, and you just kind of land on one that is just the magic number. But I mean, 95.5 is almost a guaranteed hitter no matter what, and well, I've not had a bad one yet, to be quite honest.
For me, not being a rye fan, 95.5 should be out of my ballpark.
I know.
Even anywhere in my wheelhouse. But what I tell people, and I've told plenty folks with this, is I think I've taken 3 non-selling points for me, which is it's a high rye, it's young whiskey, and it's pretty high proof.
Yeah.
And I've turned those into selling points to where, yes, it is a 95.5, but it doesn't taste like that. It is 105 proof. It doesn't taste like that. And it is 3 years old, and it doesn't taste like that.
It doesn't taste like that either. No.
So if I think that those things are true, then I've accomplished what I've set out to do.
Yeah, and I just got done tasting through some of the small batch, the very small batch, as you all call it. Correct? Yeah, very small batch. Again, it is age stated, says at least 36 months or 3 years, 105 proof. It really is quite robust for being we say on the younger side. That phrase doesn't really mean much of anything anymore when we're talking about ryes, because young ryes still taste like old bourbons. So, we can say all day long that it's a younger rye. It doesn't really have much weight anymore in this market. But it's incredibly well balanced. It's got a great depth of flavor to it as well. I truth be told, had not had Buzzard's Roost before today, and having had it, I'm really interested to see where this is going in the future as well. It even doesn't really read like, and I'd use the terminology because that's kind of the only thing that I might have, but saying something like, it's a double-barreled whiskey, essentially. Which, I mean, in some senses it is, in other senses it's not. But it doesn't even really have that quality to it. I mean, it just feels like a straight up one barrel whiskey that is. Go ahead. Sorry.
You're hitting right on the head, because to me, I've tasted some double barrels. Of course, before we did this project, we had to do extensive research and tasted some double barrels. And to me, they taste like there's the original juice, and then there's a layer of this on top.
Yes, absolutely.
They almost taste, and the double barrels, all the double barrels that I tasted, they tasted layered. Like there's this, and then there's this. Yeah. And I absolutely did not want that. I absolutely do not want it to taste like this, and then we just added some smoke or whatever to it. Like, I just didn't want that.
Right.
And I think we've achieved it for the most part by how we do our blending, that you can achieve to where it's one whiskey. It's not this whiskey with some flavoring on it or Yeah, absolutely. I think you hit it on the head, but
yeah, and I don't want to point fingers or call anybody out, but I feel like a brand like Woodford with their double oaked is highly, highly guilty of that, where it just, it doesn't always feel like a cohesive whiskey. I'm not saying it's bad, but it definitely has that quality that you're talking about. It's almost like the everlasting gobstopper, where there's like the center of it, but there's that outer shell, and like things just kind of keep evolving with it, and nothing ever really feels like you've reached the end or you've reached the conclusion of it. But that I think that the very small batch, or just the small batch, however we want to describe it, is so well put together. I mean, it just feels like a very cohesive whiskey in and of itself. So I think you guys have done a great job of that.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you're not going to hurt my feelings by what people, said they absolutely don't like some of it and do like some of it. So moving forward, as you're tasting, you can hurt my feelings all you want, because, and it's.
Jason, I want you to come back on the podcast eventually too, so we can talk about the bourbon once it gets released. So
yeah, for sure.
I'm not about hurting feelings, man. I'll be honest, but I don't want to hurt feelings.
I get it, but I don't want you to blow my skirt up either.
Oh no, and I promise you, I don't do that. That's not what I'm about.
We're out here trying to make an honest living and do trying to make an honest whiskey. Mm-hmm. And if I'm not doing my job, we definitely want to hear some feedback from it. The good and the bad.
Whoa.
But no, I think you hit right on the head. I didn't want this layered system. I wanted it to, and I absolutely made sure that we did not do that. I wanted it to be cohesive. I wanted it to be one, and I'm looking for that front to back, that whole mouthfeel, that finish, the whole thing. So hopefully you're not going to find any of mine that'll just finish on the front or go to the middle or finish on the back. I'm looking for that whole front to back, good mouthfeel, nice finish. And it's asking a lot, but I think that's what I want. I think, I'm going to try not to put anything out that doesn't do that.
Yeah, absolutely. So
a lot of people are probably listening saying, good luck.
But I mean, if you, it's not like you're coming at this from an angle of not having any experience, right? You've had plenty of experience picking barrels. You've done your homework. There's all of this to back it up, to where hopefully people can listen to what you're saying and go, oh yeah, that makes sense that he is that meticulous when he's trying to craft his whiskey. And I just took a sip, and this took a hard left turn for me in terms of what I was tasting, but I just took a sip of the single barrel that I have. I got 2 single barrels from you all. But the first one that I drank on has I was not expecting this from a rye, but a toasted marshmallow note towards the back end, which I love. It's one of my favorite notes on whiskey, truth be told. Yeah. But it really surprised me, because you normally get those really bright notes with rye, and I can definitely see where you're you're coming from that angle of trying to make it into the bourbon drinker's rye, because it feels like it. It really does feel like it. And you have those days, if you're a bourbon drinker and a rye drinker, where you're like, I'd rather have rye today, but maybe I'll have a little bit of bourbon with it as well. This kind of meets the best of both worlds for me. So we're trying to drag the rye drinkers over to the bourbon side, at least I am. But rye's been a big thing, especially on the East Coast for a long time. It's great for cocktails. It'll stand up to whatever you want to put on top of it. I think that's with the 105, the proof being up there and it being a 95.5, you can still make a great cocktail out of this. Absolutely.
But once again, I would put it up against anything to just sit around and sip either neat, a little drop of water, or a cube of ice. Of course, that's my preferred way of drinking it. I'm not a huge cocktail guy. I went to pick some barrels. I guess I'm not going to say where, I'm not going to say who, but he was kind of a celebrity, this celebrity's sommelier or cocktail guy out in Vegas. He came to one of the distilleries, asked me if I wanted to go pick some barrels with him. I said, yeah, great. We picked through 6 or 8 or however many barrels, and we don't talk at all during this thing.
Yeah, exactly.
He's writing all these notes, and I'm making notes in my head, and he picks out, okay, he wants 1, 3, and 5. Well, I had picked 2, 4, and 6. Okay, and at the end of the day, and I really didn't always realize about my palate and his palate and whatever the difference is in what we're looking for, but he's a cocktail guy. All of those notes in my head were the barrels that he picked were spicy. They were, I didn't really enjoy sipping on them. The ones I picked, I enjoyed just sipping it neat. So he's got his job and I have my job, and that's where he's got a great palate. And that's where I finally kind of realized that's why, we're so different, is I like mine to sip on and he likes his for cocktails. And it worked out perfect, so. Yeah.
And truth be told, I'm not a huge cocktail guy either. I would much rather go and grab a neat pour of bourbon. Sure. But while we're kind of on the topic of the bourbon as well, you guys are about to release your first bourbon here soon, correct?
We are. So we talked.
Are we allowed to talk about it? I'm sorry.
Yeah, we are.
Okay.
We talked about the rebarreling and all of that. And we're kind of gonna decipher this once we do actually bottle it, but it should have reacted a little sooner with the barrels. And I don't know whether the weather's been mild or what, but we've tasted them and it's been in there. It's been in there way over 10 weeks, and that's usually kind of our cutoff. But it's bourbon. It's not going to hurt it, but it's not reacting like we wanted it to. So we're just holding on to it. It was supposed to be out in the spring for Derby. So if that tells you anything, it's still sitting and we're tasting it. Man, it's a little slower to react, which all of our, experiments said it should have reacted a lot faster. Mm-hmm. So it's not ready, so we're not putting it out. That's just kind of bottom line. And we had banked on putting that out, and it's not out, so we're not ready. But once we do bottle that, we're going to take those barrels and examine them to make sure that we actually got the right barrel, the right toast, and put it through the chemical analysis and all that. Just because at some point they think we may have gotten something screwed up down at the during COVID, maybe down at the at ISC. So
sure.
We'll see about that. But we tasted it and we know what our barrels taste like, and it almost just not even scratched the surface that it didn't taste like it'd been in our barrels at all.
Wow.
And we know what those flavors are supposed to be, being in number 5 or number 4 or number 3 barrel. It's supposed
Right.
to taste like this. It's supposed to have these influences on it, which it didn't. So we'll see what happens. We since bought some more bourbon, and we put some more. We've laid some more down. So hopefully this may react like we're wanting it to. But we've got a close eye on that other one. Hopefully it'll come around by the fall.
I'm looking forward, and of course I don't mind waiting, but I'm looking forward to when that actually happens, when it actually gets released, especially based on how much I've enjoyed the rye this far. I want to talk about too this peated rye that you all just put out, and before we hit record, we were talking about how you were never really a Scotch drinker. I've just recently kind of started getting into peated Scotches as well, but what an interesting choice for a product when you don't necessarily like some of the notes that are so heavily associated with it,
Well, once again, if you know me at all, people know I don't like ryes and I don't like Scotches. But being in the whiskey business, I do drink them on occasion, and just I have nothing against it. I'll sit around and drink one if everybody else is, and we'll compare notes and do whatever. But what an interesting concept. We've taken our number 1 char, our toasted barrel, like we normally do, our bourbon barrel for the rye, basically. Before we put the rye in it, it's got those bourbon tones in it. And the last step is we took some Scottish peat and we toasted the barrel, or smoked the barrel with the peat. So, and when you do taste this, and I know you said you're going to taste it at a later date, and that's fine because of it may off your palate a little bit. But it's so subtle, and it came out to me, not being a Scotch drinker, it came out perfect. I just was sitting with a writer just now before I came up here, and she loves Scotches and said, it's just varies ever so slightly, and she's got a great palate. And I said, that's exactly how I wanted it. And I had a Scotch guy at a tasting give me a bunch of crap about it. He's like, you got to double that. You got to make it stronger. I was like, that's not what I was shooting for.
That's not what you wanted. Yeah, exactly.
But it's very interesting. It's got a rye. It's got this bourbon notes, and it's got this Scotchy note. So it's kind of a 3-in-1 gig, and it's really interesting. I've heard a lot of people say it's really interesting. But we're getting some great feedback about it. We're getting it, especially if you're a Scotch fan, and so I'm trying to drag the Scotch guys into the bourbon category too. So,
will you have a peated barrel bourbon eventually as well?
That I don't know. I don't know if we're going to venture out too much with the bourbon. We haven't seen. We don't want all these labels. A lot of them are limited time releases.
Sure.
We're going to see at the end of the day how this peated comes back. I think we'll do it again. But our 4 mainstays are going to be the small batch, the single barrel, the barrel strength, and the toasted barrel. Those are going to be on the shelves at all the time. We brought our toasted out, and it sold out quickly. And we were going to do it once in the fall every year, and then when it runs out, it runs out. But it won a double gold in San Francisco this year.
Oh, that's fantastic! Congratulations.
So we're going to keep that. We're going to keep that one rolling. People were big fans of it. So 2020, our single barrel won a gold medal out there, and then for 2021, our barrel strength won a gold medal, and then the toasted won a double gold. So we're 3 for 3 that we've sent out there. The San Francisco is no joke. Those guys do a great job out there, and we're proud to be a part of it. And we're really just couldn't be more excited about our awards from out there.
Yeah, you guys are. It just sounds like everything is very much just on the way for you all to be incredibly successful here over the next couple of years. And I've seen your all's product in stores, of course, in Liquor Barn. It's definitely shown up, and I hope that people are buying into it sooner rather than later for you all, especially knowing that you guys have done so well out in San Francisco. So we
are doing some single barrels for those guys. So they're doing store picks. I know Total Wine's done a couple barrels. Liquor Barn, Westport Wine and Whiskey's done one. So there is kind of a single barrel program that we're working on. Of course, it's very limited. We just opened in the state of Massachusetts, and we're hoping to be in 7 states by the end of the year.
Gotcha. That's great, man. So beyond that, what's next? What do you want to do? Beyond expansion, beyond doing the bourbon, where are you headed?
Yeah, bourbon's a big thing. I'm not going to put that out until it's exactly where I want it to be.
Absolutely.
There's some new make on the horizons that we're going to contract work. So we're going to try to see what our barrels will do on some new make, which we haven't done yet.
Yeah.
We've done some experiments on some new make, but
sure.
Not our version of the new make. So there's some new make on the horizon, which is obviously going to be bourbon. Let's see. We're working with, it's not all come to fruition yet, but we're thinking about either partnering with a cigar company and or doing some Kentucky tobacco to where instead of peat, we're going to sub tobacco. And whether it be a cigar company or whether it be Kentucky, we're probably going to end up doing both. I know there's a Kentucky cheroot I used to smoke years ago that I don't know anything about, but we're going to look into that. So there's certain we're going to do the peat smoked for Kentucky is going to kind of turn into a tobacco smoked, and hopefully it's just going to have that extra little hint of cigar or tobacco smoke on the barrel, which that's what we're looking for. The sweetness from the bourbon, the spiciness from the rye, and a little bit of smokiness from the tobacco. So we'll see. We're excited about that one for sure.
I'm excited to hear about that too. I love smoking a good cigar every now and then, and hearing that there's something that's going to be, supposed to be directly paired with the cigar. All about it. I think that sounds fantastic.
Yeah, well, we're really excited about that one too.
So, Jason, before we get out of here, I got to ask you one more question. Has Jim Rutledge picked anything there yet?
No, not yet. I haven't talked to Jim in a while. He's busy man, and
he is.
Good friend of mine. I hope if he's listening to this, I'm telling him said hey, and we'll catch up soon. But what a great guy! I mean, just a stand-up guy in the industry. He's
absolutely,
been a mentor to me as much as he can but also a good friend.
Sure.
And he supports me. He came to our opening when we came out, and it was July of 2019 when we had our release party, and Jim was there with a bunch of other people from the whiskey community. And it's just, they're all supportive of me, I think. It's always, it's like a big family. You were talking about the South and whatever. But this whiskey community, bourbon and whiskey is just unbelievable. I mean,
it's incredible.
To me, I consider them as brothers or sisters and close family. We're just all good friends, and can't say enough good things about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And hopefully we can get the word out more for you as well, because I'm so excited to see what you guys are going to do next, and so hopefully see the successful future for you all as well.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate it, and thanks for having me on. And you're going to have to send me a text after you get done with your other thing tonight. Drink the peated and shoot me a text or something. I want to see what you think about it. I'm
totally down for that. I'm
sorry we couldn't send you any of the toasted because it was out.
That's okay.
And actually, the barrel strength when all this was being set up, the barrel strength was out. So we kind of got caught off guard. It's
totally
really
fine.
Well.
It's totally fine.
We're catching up, and we hopefully check your shelves. It'll be out there, and
we'll catch up again soon. I'm sure as well. But Jason, thank you all so much. If you guys are in Louisville or around Louisville, definitely go and I guess you don't really have a place to go to, do you?
Not yet. We're working on that as well.
There we go. That's on the horizon.
We're working on we're looking downtown Louisville, looking to put a little tasting room. So
great.
Be looking out for that. If not, I mean, you can get it at Bourbon's Bistro. So
there you go.
And I'm still kicking around here a little bit. We can do an impromptu tasting or something.
Perfect. I might just have to mosey on up to Louisville soon to hit up Bourbon's. So
yeah, sounds great, man.
We'll see what we can do. Jason, thank you again so much. It's been a lot of fun getting to talk with you. And I'm sure we'll talk soon.
All right. Thanks, Perry.
Hope you all enjoyed that as much as I did. I really, really had a great time getting to record with Jason. I want to say thank you so much to the folks over at Buzzard's Roost and everybody from the PR firm that helped set this up as well. You guys are great. You guys are awesome. Looking forward to doing more with you in the near future. Tips and bits for this week. Man, I just saw for the first time, and I know I'm like a year and a half behind on it, but I gotta throw it out there because I loved it so much, and it got me super friggin' excited for the second one. Knives Out. Man, it was so good. If you don't have faith in somebody like Rian Johnson after his foray into the Star Wars universe with The Last Jedi, look no further. This is an incredible tale that I had so much fun with. It is goofy. It's full of heart. It is extremely well paced, and it has some good action with it as well. Nothing over the top, but it's just a really good whodunit murder mystery story, and I enjoyed it a lot. So that's my tips and bits for this week. I know it's a little bit of a shorter one, a little bit of a shorter episode, but that's what happens when you have a good interview and when you're on vacation. So hope you all have a great week. I am looking forward to being back next week. I got another interview that you're going to be checking out then. If you have not followed me on social media, I'm at PRitter1492. If you have not followed the show yet, it's at My Bourbon Pod on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. You can leave us a 5-star rating and review on whatever podcatcher app you use, and we will read it out here on the show if you would like for us to. If not, just leave us a little note. We won't do it. So that's how that goes. You can find all of our apparel and merchandise at bourbonshop.threadless.com, including our skateboards. Still only one of those sold. So we are going to be having a new store launching and a website very, very soon. So be on the lookout for that. I'm working on making that a reality. So I'm very excited for you guys to see that. Some things in the works. You can send all of your questions or comments to thisismybourbonshop@gmail.com. I'll respond to them there. You can also send us private messages, of course, on all social media channels. I'm usually pretty responsive. If I'm not, I apologize. Things are busy in a fairly new dad life, so that's just kind of how it goes. If you have not yet subscribed to the YouTube channel, it's youtube.com/thisismybourbonpodcast. I have new videos that go up there about every other week, every 3 weeks. Twice a month, typically, is what I'm trying to do at the moment. The most recent one, of course, was why Rare Breed is the best value in bourbon. If you've watched that, thank you so much. Go share it with your friends. It was a really fun time to make and a really fun time to record and edit, and it's just good. It's just good stuff. Last but not least, patreon.com/mybourbonpodcast. For as little as $1 a month, you can support the show. Keeps things rolling, keeps the lights on, and I guess we better give a little shout out to our newest Patreon member. I had a couple recently. But we will work our way through them. As of recording, we've got 2, but I'm going to hold off. I'm going to hold off on the second one. Build up a little bit of suspense, if that's okay. John Wadsworth. Thank you, John, so much for becoming a patron of the show. Man, it really helps out a lot. John's been a buddy of the show for a long time as well, and just finally made the leap into supporting the show on Patreon. And again, you can do the same thing at patreon.com/mybourbonpodcast. That does it for this week. Excited for you guys to check out next week's episode as well. Oh, I'm still going live this week, by the way. I'm going live on Thursday night on YouTube. Got a special guest, I think. I think she's going to be on. I'm pretty sure. We'll see. Anyway, we'll see you all next week. But until then, I'm Perry, and this is My Bourbon Podcast.